There is a poison of the soul. It is not loud like anger, nor sharp like grief. It is a slow, quiet seep, a bitter warmth that spreads through your veins when you think of a past injustice. It is the feeling of resentment. And we are often told to let it go, to forgive, to move on. But what if that advice is profoundly wrong? What if your resentment is not a burden to be discarded, but a sacred messenger to be heard? The great psychologist Carl Jung taught that our most difficult emotions are often doorways to our deepest truths, and resentment is one of the most honest messengers of all. It is a signal flare fired from a part of your soul that has been abandoned, a part of your shadow that you have refused to claim. It is not just telling you what was done to you. It is screaming at you about what you have failed to do for yourself. In our time together today, we will learn to decode this powerful message. First, we will unmask resentment for what it truly is, a compass pointing directly to your disowned power. Then, we will explore how the very things you resent in others reveal the unclaimed strengths within your own shadow. And most importantly, I will guide you through a practical shadow work exercise to begin transforming this poison into your personal power. This is not a lesson in forgiveness. This is a masterclass in self-reclamation. To begin this alchemical work, make a quiet declaration. Write in the comments below, "I am ready to listen."
Resentment begins with a story of injustice, a story replayed on a loop in the private theater of your mind. The colleague who took credit for your work, the parent who never saw your true worth, the partner who broke a sacred promise, the friend who wasn't there when you needed them most. The story is always the same. It has a villain and it has a victim. And in this story, you are always the victim. This is not a judgment. It is a description of the energy. Resentment is the emotional state of powerlessness. It is the bitter indignation of having been treated unfairly, coupled with the frustrating inability to do anything about it. Anger is a fire. It seeks action. It wants to change things. Resentment is a swamp. It is stagnant. It keeps you stuck in the mud of the past, reliving the wound again and again. And here is the difficult truth that our culture of blame often encourages us to ignore. While the initial hurt may have been caused by someone else, the ongoing suffering of resentment is a prison we build for ourselves. We are the ones who keep replaying the movie. We are the ones who keep drinking the poison, hoping the other person will get sick. Why? Why do we cling so tightly to a feeling that causes us so much pain? Because on a deep, unconscious level, the resentment is serving a purpose. It feels like a shield. It feels like a way of holding the other person accountable in the courtroom of our mind, since we cannot get justice in the real world. It feels righteous. Let's meet Jessica. She is 42. A devoted mother and a talented graphic designer who put her career on hold to raise her children. Her husband, a successful lawyer, always encouraged this choice. Now the children are older, and Jessica is ready to return to work. She is excited, full of ideas. But every time she brings it up, her husband finds a reason to delay. He'll say things like, "Is this really the best time with the economy like this?" Or, "The kids still need you so much after school." Or, "Are you sure you want the stress of a deadline-driven job again?" He says these things with a tone of loving concern. But Jessica feels a familiar, bitter taste rising in her throat. It is resentment. In the story she tells herself, Her husband is the villain. He is subtly sabotaging her ambition. He is trapping her in a domestic role. He is not honoring his promise that she could have her turn. She doesn't say any of this out loud. Instead, the resentment festers. It comes out in small, passive-aggressive jabs, a sarcastic comment about his long work hours, a cold shoulder in the evening. Their connection becomes poisoned by this unspoken bitterness. Jessica feels completely justified in her resentment. She feels like a victim of his broken promises and subtle control. Now, as we discussed, Carl Jung would not ask, "What is her husband doing to her?" He would ask a much deeper, more revealing question. What is this resentment revealing about Jessica's own unclaimed shadow? The shadow, remember, is everything we have disowned about ourselves. This includes our disowned needs, our disowned desires, and our disowned power. And resentment is the GPS that points directly to these abandoned parts of our own soul. It is a homing beacon for our own abdicated power. Jessica's resentment is not just a feeling about her husband, it is a symptom. The disease is not his behavior. The disease is her own silence, her unwillingness to claim her own power. The story of injustice feels true to her because it allows her to avoid a much scarier truth. The truth is, she is not a victim. She is a volunteer. She has been waiting for him to give her permission to pursue her dreams, instead of taking that permission for herself. She has been hoping he would magically change, instead of initiating the difficult, honest conversation required to change the dynamic. Her resentment is a shield protecting her from the terrifying responsibility of her own agency. It's easier to be angry at him for being a roadblock than to be scared of driving her own car down a new and uncertain road. This is the great hidden function of resentment. It keeps us in the familiar, painful comfort of the victim role, because stepping into our power is terrifying. It means risking conflict. It means setting boundaries. It means potentially disappointing the people we love. It means owning our own desires and taking responsibility for their fulfillment. So when you feel that familiar, bitter sting of resentment, I invite you to pause, to look beneath the story of what they did, and to ask the courageous Jungian question: what part of my own power have I given away? What truth have I failed to speak? What boundary have I failed to draw? What desire have I failed to honor? The resentment is not the problem. The resentment is the map, and it is pointing you back home to the unclaimed territories of your own powerful, sovereign soul.
Your resentment is an arrow, and that arrow is always pointing to one of two things in your unclaimed shadow: a violated boundary or a disowned desire. Learning to distinguish between these two is a crucial skill in this shadow work. It is the art of reading the compass. Let's first explore resentment as a signal of a violated boundary. This is the most common form of resentment, and it festers in the soil of silence. It is the feeling that arises when you have consistently allowed your needs, your time, or your values to be overridden without speaking your truth. You resent the friend who always calls to unload their problems but never asks about your day. The arrow is not pointing at their self-absorption. The arrow is pointing at your failure to say, "I'm sorry, I don't have the emotional capacity for this right now." You resent the family member who makes critical comments about your life choices. The arrow is not pointing at their judgment. The arrow is pointing at your failure to say, "I appreciate your concern, but this is my life, and this topic is not up for discussion." A boundary is not a wall to keep people out. It is a line you draw in the sand that says, "This is me. This is where I end and you begin. This is what I will and will not accept in my space." When you fail to draw and defend these lines, you leave the gates to your soul wide open. And resentment is the smoke that signals the inner kingdom is being plundered. It is the cry of your sovereign self, telling you that you have abdicated your throne. You have given away your power to say no. And the person you are truly resentful of is yourself, for your own silence, for your own inaction. The other person is just the mirror, reflecting back the boundary you failed to set. But there is a second, more subtle and profound layer to this. Sometimes the arrow of resentment is not pointing to something you failed to stop. It is pointing to something you have failed to start. This is resentment as a signal of a disowned desire. This is the territory of the golden shadow, the part of our unconscious that holds our highest potentials, our greatest strengths, and our most vibrant creativity. We often exile these positive qualities to the shadow for the same reasons we exile our darkness. We fear their power. We fear the responsibility that comes with them. We feel the visibility they would bring. And so we project them. We find other people who embody the very qualities we have disowned in ourselves, and we feel a strange, conflicted mix of admiration and resentment towards them. Let's imagine Sarah. She's a 40-year-old stay-at-home mother, a role she chose and mostly loves, but she has a friend, Maria, who is a successful entrepreneur. Maria is bold, ambitious, and unapologetically takes up space in the world. And Sarah secretly resents her. When Maria talks about her latest business success, Sarah offers a tight, forced smile, while inside a bitter voice whispers, "She's so arrogant. All she cares about is work." Where is the arrow of resentment pointing? It is not pointing at her self-absorption. The arrow is pointing directly at Sarah's own disowned ambition. Before she had children, Sarah had a dream of starting her own business, a dream she buried because she believed a good mother should be completely selfless. She exiled her own ambition, her own boldness, her own desire for professional recognition into her shadow. Maria is simply living out Sarah's golden shadow. The resentment is the cry of Sarah's own unlived potential. It is the part of her that is screaming, "That should be me. I have that power too, but I am too afraid to claim it." This is one of the most difficult and most liberating realizations in all of shadow work. The people you resent the most are often your greatest teachers. They are showing you the parts of your own soul that are begging for integration. Your resentment of their freedom reveals your own caged spirit. Your resentment of their confidence reveals your own unowned self-worth. Your resentment of their creativity reveals your own dormant artist. So how do you begin to read this compass for yourself? It begins with a courageous practice of self-inquiry. I call it following the arrow. Take out your journal. Bring to mind a specific person or situation that sparks resentment in you. Feel the bitter heat of it for a moment, and then ask the arrow one of two questions. Question 1 for boundaries. What is the no that I failed to speak? Sit with that. Allow the honest answer to surface without judgment. The no was, "I will not continue to do work that is not my responsibility." The no was, "You may not speak to me in that tone of voice." Simply naming the unspoken no is a profound act of reclaiming power. Question 2 for desires. What is the quality in this person that I both admire and resent? And what is the yes to that quality that I have been afraid to say in my own life? Let's use Sarah's example. The quality in Maria is unapologetic ambition. Sarah's unspoken yes is, "Yes, I want to be a mother and I want to build something of my own. Yes, my own dreams are valid and important. Yes, I give myself permission to be both. Do you feel the power in that? The resentment is the lock. This inquiry is the key. You are not just analyzing a feeling. You are decoding a direct message from the wisest, most untamed part of yourself. A message that is trying desperately to guide you back to your own wholeness. To know your truth is wisdom. To act on your truth is power. The final and most crucial stage of this shadow work is to move from the inner world of insight to the outer world of action. It is the act of reclamation. You have followed the arrow of your resentment. You have identified the unclaimed territory. Now you must plant your flag. This is often the most terrifying step because it involves risk, but it is the only way to dissolve the poison of resentment for good. If your resentment has pointed to a violated boundary, the act of reclamation is to finally speak the unspoken no. This is not about aggression or confrontation. It is about clear, calm, and compassionate communication of your truth. Let's return to Jessica, our graphic designer, who resents her husband's subtle sabotage of her career ambitions. She has realized that the arrow is pointing to her own silence, her failure to set a boundary around her dream. For weeks, she practices what she will say. She does this work internally first. She honors her fear, the fear of his disapproval, the fear of conflict. And she also connects with the powerful, ambitious part of her shadow that is desperate to be seen. Finally, she chooses a quiet moment. She doesn't do it in the heat of an argument. She says calmly and lovingly, "I want to talk about my desire to go back to work. It is incredibly important to me, and I need to feel that you are my partner in this, not an obstacle. I feel hurt and unsupported when you raise objections instead of helping me brainstorm solutions. I need to start taking concrete steps, and I would love for you to be my biggest cheerleader." Do you feel the power in that? She is not blaming. She is not attacking. She is owning her feeling, stating her need, and making a clear request. She is drawing a boundary. She has no control over how her husband will react. He may get defensive. He may be hurt. But that is not the point. The point is that Jessica has taken back her power. She has honored her truth. The moment she speaks these words, the resentment begins to lose its grip, because the resentment was never truly about him. It was about her own silence, and now she is no longer silent. If your resentment has pointed to a disowned desire, the act of reclamation is to take one small symbolic step to honor that desire. Let's look at Sarah, the mother who resents her entrepreneurial friend Maria. Sarah has realized the arrow is pointing to her own disowned ambition, her own golden shadow. The reclamation for her is not to suddenly abandon her family and launch a startup. That would be a reactive swing of the pendulum. The work is more subtle. It is about integration. Her act of reclamation is to sign up for an online course in a subject she is passionate about, something totally for herself. It's just 2 hours a week, but it is a powerful, symbolic act. She is sending a message to her own soul. Your dreams matter. Your potential is valid. You are more than just one role. The moment she clicks enroll, the bitter sting of resentment she feels toward Maria begins to soften. It is replaced by a spark of her own excitement, her own purpose. She has stopped projecting her golden shadow onto her friend and started the work of owning it for herself. She doesn't need Maria to be smaller. She just needs to allow herself to be bigger. This is the alchemy. When you set the boundary, you no longer need to resent the person who was crossing it. When you honor the desire, you no longer need to resent the person who is living it. The resentment dissolves because its job is done. Its job was to get your attention, to show you where your own life force was leaking, to guide you back to the site of your own abdicated power. This work requires a profound shift in perspective, from seeing yourself as a victim of others to seeing yourself as the sole author of your own life. As Carl Jung wisely said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Resentment keeps you trapped in what happened to you. Reclamation is the choice to become something new. It is the choice to take responsibility for your own needs, your own boundaries, and your own dreams. It is the most empowering and most challenging work you will ever do. But it is the only path to a life free from the quiet, corrosive poison of bitterness. It is the path to a peace that is not dependent on anyone else's apology or permission. It is a peace you build yourself, one courageous conversation, one honored desire at a time.
Today, we have descended into the swamp of resentment, not to drown in it, but to find the hidden treasure at its bottom. We began by acknowledging the sticky, stagnant nature of this painful emotion, a prison of powerlessness we build for ourselves. We saw through the story of Jessica how resentment festers in silence, poisoning our connections and our peace. We then reframed resentment entirely. Through the profound lens of Carl Jung's shadow work, we learned to see it not as a burden, but as a sacred compass. A compass that points its arrow toward one of two things in our unclaimed shadow: a violated boundary or a disowned desire. We learn to follow that arrow, to decode its message, and to see our greatest resentments as signposts to our own unlived potential. And most importantly, we learned the art of reclamation. We discovered that the only antidote to the poison of resentment is a courageous act of power, the power to speak our unspoken no, and the power to honor our disowned yes. The path out of the victim story is not forgiveness, not yet. It is responsibility. A radical, terrifying, and ultimately liberating responsibility for your own life. It is the understanding that your peace, your fulfillment, and your power are not things that can be given to you or taken from you by another. They are territories within your own soul that must be claimed and cultivated by you, and you alone. This is the essence of becoming a sovereign individual. You stop waiting for the world to be fair. You start creating your own fairness by honoring your own truth. You stop waiting for permission. You become your own permission. But as you reclaim your power and the resentment begins to dissolve, a new question often arises from the depths: the question of forgiveness. We've learned today that you don't need to forgive them to be free from resentment. You simply need to reclaim yourself. But what if you want to go a step further? What does true, soul-level forgiveness actually look like? How is it different from the superficial forget and forget we are often taught? And what is the crucial, often overlooked role that your own shadow plays in your ability to truly forgive yourself and others? That is the deep, essential path we will walk together in our next conversation as we explore Carl Jung's shadow, the key to true forgiveness. For now, your invitation is to plant your flag, to take the first step in dissolving a resentment, not by letting it go,
but by claiming its message. In the comments below, I invite you to declare the power you are choosing to reclaim. You do not need to share the story. Simply state the reclamation. For example, I reclaim my right to say no. Or, I reclaim my ambition. By writing it here, you are making a powerful declaration to your own unconscious. You are signaling that the reign of resentment is ending, and the era of your sovereignty has just begun. Thank you for your courage to reclaim your power. Your peace is waiting.